There is a big problem with our assumptions about Armageddon. It's a word that has taken on epic connotations. Use this particular word and you immediately conjure up images of the most violent, bloody battles imaginable. It's the war to end all wars. But is the common understanding about Armageddon actually correct? We are currently living in a time when there is much fear and worry. It seems the state of the world is hanging by a thread, and the threat of escalating violence is a very real concern. The word Armageddon is being voiced more and more. Many people are wondering if we may be seeing it happen soon. But what exactly is the situation that brings it about? What are the signs that we could be looking for? We may assume that we know, but have the prophecy teachers we've listened to correctly understood what is stated in the Bible? Join me and let's examine the topic for ourselves. The English word Armageddon is found in only one place in the Bible, Revelation 16:16. And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. I've quoted the LSB as an example of a very typical translation of this verse. Some translators have included footnotes which state, some manuscripts read Armageddon, others read Harmageddon, other manuscripts read Megiddo, other manuscripts read Megiddo. So it would seem that there are variants of the spelling in the Greek manuscripts that the translations are based on. Let's start investigating why this could be. First, it's very important to keep in mind that the text states it is originally a Hebrew word. Greek is transliterating it, an approximation of how it is vocalized in the Hebrew language. This word did not exist in the Greek language. Next, notice that some manuscripts include Ar or Har, and some don't. So, whatever this term was in Hebrew, it very likely is made up of two components, which have been combined in the transliteration. The H in Hebrew is a very breathy sound. The manuscripts which do not include the letter H recognize this fact and don't include it in their transliteration. In Hebrew, there is a word, Har. It means mountain or hill. The rest of the term is assumed to be Megiddo or Megiddon. The pronunciation of the D-O-N is actually do. The N is silent. So according to Strong's pronunciation guide, the transliteration is Har Megiddo. Scholars have most often connected this part of the transliteration with the city or place named Megiddo, which is about 55 miles north of Jerusalem and about 11 miles from Nazareth. The word itself also has a particular meaning. In Hebrew, it means place of crowds or rendezvous. This will be particularly significant as we continue. The location, Megiddo, occurs several times in the Old Testament. It was the site of several battles. One of the most significant is that which pitted King Josiah against Pharaoh Necho. See this in 2 Chronicles 35 and 2 Kings 23. Necho had warned Josiah not to get involved as the Egyptian army made their way to Carchemish to engage the Babylonians and to help their Assyrian ally. Josiah ignored this warning, which was said to be of God, and he was killed at Megiddo. This leads to the other place where Megiddo is mentioned, Zechariah 12:11. In that day there will be a great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadad-rimmon in the plain of Megiddo. This place, called Hadad-rimmon, occurs only in this verse, and scholars have determined it is quite near to the Megiddo site. It is not said when this time of mourning occurred. However, after the Egyptian arrow shot and killed Josiah, the people of Judah had an intense time of mourning for their righteous king. Even the prophet Jeremiah composed a lament. But notice the significant detail. The location is described as the plain of Megiddo. This term also occurs in 2 Chronicles 35 verse 22. However, Josiah would not turn away from him, but disguised himself in order to make war with him, nor did he listen to the words of Necho from the mouth of God, but came to make war on the plain of Megiddo. Nowhere does it say Megiddo was associated with a mountain. Megiddo is not located on a mountain. The nearest mountain is Mount Carmel. This detail suggests that the common understanding which many prophecy experts teach might not be accurate. Zechariah 12 is very significant for another related reason. The passage contains a prophecy about the battle that God has with the nations of the world at Jerusalem. The text describes a siege against Jerusalem in Zechariah 12 verse 2. Multiple times it is stated this battle happens during the day of Yahweh, using the shorthand that day. This phrase occurs in the verses 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, and 11. But for many people, their assumption is that the battle to end all battles takes place at Megiddo, very much north of Jerusalem. Zechariah 12:9 specifically states that the armies of the world gather around and attack at Jerusalem. And it will be in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. A couple of chapters later, in chapter 14, Zechariah also describes the same battle. Then Yahweh will go forth and fight against those nations, as the day when he fights on a day of battle. 7 times the phrase "that day" occurs in this chapter. Ezekiel also describes this battle in chapters 38 and 39. And I will call for a sword against him on all my mountains, declares Lord Yahweh. Every man's sword will be against his brother. In verse 23, and I will magnify myself. I will magnify myself as holy, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations, and they will know that I am Yahweh. Daniel too has details of this battle in Daniel 11, verse 45, where he specifies the holy mountain where Jerusalem is located. And he, the king of the north, will pitch the tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him. John describes this same battle in Revelation 14. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia. A few chapters later, John continues in Revelation 19:19. Then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war with him who sits on the horse and with his army. There are additional details given about this battle. Zechariah 14 describes a massive earthquake which will split the Mount of Olives. Find this in Zechariah 14 verses 4 and 5. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half of the mountain will move toward the north and the other half toward the south. Then Yahweh, my God, will come, and all the holy ones with him. In the 3rd chapter of Joel, he gives details about this final battle at the Valley of Jehoshaphat. This is another name for the Kidron Valley next to the Mount of Olives. Joel 3:12-16. Let the nations be roused up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Send in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. And Yahweh roars from Zion, and gives forth his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But Yahweh is a refuge for his people, and a strong defense to the sons of Israel. This is the valley which will contain the blood, up to the height of the horse bridle. As we've read in Revelation, it will flow for 1,600 stadia, which is about 180 miles. This just happens to be the distance from Jerusalem to the Gulf of Aqaba, by way of the Dead Sea to the east. If we consider the location of Megiddo, there is nothing significant 180 miles from that location. And it's quite a different image to have a wide, flat plain filled 5 feet high with blood, as opposed to a valley. However, the thought itself is horrific no matter which location it would be. The fact is that there is no mention anywhere of the battle of the day of the Lord happening at Megiddo. But what about Revelation 16:16? It states the location right there. But does it? For the answer, we have to take a deep dive into the Hebrew word which is the source of the transliteration. What word is it most likely from? The Hebrew alphabet consists of consonant letters. The vowels are indicated by markings above and below these consonants. The vowel markings were invented by the Masoretes during the last centuries of the first millennium AD. But during the biblical era, there was no systematized indication of the vowels, so pronunciation was memorized and handed down from generation to generation. In addition, there were also different dialects in different regions, and this also affected how people pronounced certain words. So what the Greek transliterated is made up of the combination of the Hebrew word har, and then the letters M and G and D, and the sound O, and the letter N. The vowels between were not specified, and the transliteration would have been according to how it sounded to the ear of the Greek author or scribe. It was transliterated to Har Megiddo. The Peshitta, the New Testament in Aramaic or Syriac, is also an important witness for this passage. The Aramaic language is extremely similar to Hebrew and can even be written with the same Hebrew block letters. Again, no vowel markings existed during those early centuries. The Hebrew term in the Peshitta occurs with the specific consonants M, G, D, and W, the W having a sound of a breathy oo. These are the very same consonants. Earlier, I mentioned that Megiddo means place of gathering, meeting, or rendezvous. Add in the word mountain, and the phrase is the mountain of gathering. There is a very significant passage in Isaiah with this exact phrase. Isaiah 14:12-14. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Here, the term is Har Moed. It has the H-A-R, the M, O, A, and D. The word Moed means appointed place, time, or meeting. It is often used to describe the prescribed times for the feasts of Yahweh, which were 7 altogether. During the year, God required the people of Israel to come up to Jerusalem, the mount, and assemble themselves at the temple for the specific feasts of Passover, unleavened bread, the Feasts of Weeks, and the Feast of Ingathering, or Booths. It is significant that Messiah Jesus fulfilled the purposes of the Passover and unleavened bread during his first coming. These feasts took place in the springtime. Later in the year, the church was initiated at the Feast of Weeks. The autumn feast of Ingathering has had no ultimate fulfillment yet. Many expect that the autumn feasts will be fulfilled at the second coming of Jesus. This passage in Isaiah is very significant as it addresses the star of the morning who fell from heaven and decided to place himself on the Mount of Assembly, located at the side of the north. This describes the location of Jerusalem, and specifically the temple, which was located at the very north end of the city of David. The enemy desires to put himself in the very place of God in his holy city during the last days. So then, how does this Hebrew word term, Har Moed, connect with the Greek transliteration of Har Megiddo? Although the word Moed is in modern Hebrew uses the consonants M and D, there is a pronunciation recorded in a Hebrew dictionary that adds a G between. Moged. Find this in the Englishman's Hebrew and Chaldee Concordance of the Old Testament. So there existed a time when it was pronounced with a guttural GH. Moged. These are the very same consonants as exist in both the Peshitta and the Greek transliterations. Therefore, this term would not be referring to the place of Megiddo in northern Israel at all. It most likely is referring to the Mount of Assembly, another term for the city of Jerusalem, where the people of Israel gathered, and the location of the throne of God on earth was in the temple. Understanding the term in Revelation 16:16 this way now does not conflict with the rest of Scripture for the location of the final battle of God against the assembled armies of the world. Revelation is full of references to concepts and terms in the Old Testament, and here is just one more example of how John is referring back to the prophet Isaiah and how he is describing the location of the city of Jerusalem. The phrase being transliterated properly in English as Har Moed. See you in part 2, where we will discuss the battle plan of Har Moed.